I grabbed my paint can and headed around the porch to the southeast side again. Carol had left her brush and paint on that side, so I grabbed them and brought them out to her. She was still standing on the sidewalk. She shook her head firmly for a second as if shaking off some spell. She broke free of whatever it was and stepped forward. She was tired. It showed. I was tired too, but I preferred Carol not know about it. "Let's do it," said Carol, in a self-motivational gesture. I repeated the phrase and returned to my shady post. Gratefully, the alley was considerably cooler than the exposed areas out in front. Carol was on the porch and shaded from the sun also. The rest of the afternoon would be a little easier for both of us. Carol had covered only a 20-foot section of the side, and she hadn't climbed the fence. There were 30 more feet to the front of the house, as well as the whole front-to-back section up high that couldn't be reached from the ground. For safety reasons, I did the fence climbing part first, while I still had some energy. Back to front with a 3-minute break in the middle. I leaned on the house alternately with my left and right hands while I dipped and painted with the other. I hooked the paint can to the top of the fence and moved it frontward in 3-foot intervals. I squatted carefully, keeping my attention on my balance and the grip of my sneakers. Dipped and wiped the brush, then stood and stroked it onto the house with as broad a stroke as I could manage. The moisture from the trees in the shade kept the metal fence pipes wet and slippery. My feet slipped an inch here or there, but with the left hand on the house during the brush dip, I figured the worst I could do was slip off the fence feet first. Not life-threatening. Carol appeared at the front of the alley at 6. She was reflecting scattered light with a thin layer of sweat, and had lightly speckled her shirt and forearms with the periwig. Most noticeable was the streak of smudged blue across her forehead. I figured she knew about the streak, so I asked her if she was done. "Well, it isn't my finest work," she began, "but yes, I'm done." She held out her paint can and then placed it next to the house in the alley. "Here's some extra paint if you need more." "Actually, I think I might make it," I told her. "Well, don't spread it too thin there," Carol began. Then she paused. She raised her partially blue right hand to her head and wiped herself from one side of the forehead to the other, right across the blue swath. It was amusing to watch, but it was clear she cared little about her end-of-the-day appearance. Her hair was back in a ponytail, though some of it had ridden up in the elastic band and freed itself. A handful of loose, clumped strands had pulled free and hung damply over her shoulders. Carol looked warm, definitely messy, but also good. Her t-shirt was baggy, draping, damp, and she filled out her white painter's pants with an almost athletic firmness. I imagined her sturdy thickness was a good part muscle, toned and deserved. Protective fibers wrapped it generously where needed to accomplish what needed accomplishing. For a minute, I inspected Carol's shape more closely than before, with a full intent to remember. Carol was voluptuous, not an uncommon word, but maybe an overused one. I finished the side of the house at 6:42. I put the unfinished can of paint in the back and the brushes we used in 2 cans of thinner. Carol instructed me to hold on to the brushes and to leave them in the thinner overnight. She said she'd clean them herself the next day and not to worry about it. When I was placing the can of paint on a shelf under the carport, a voice called out from the direction of St. Peter Street, behind the house. "It's Michael, right? Hey, you helping Carol paint the house?" Phyllis asked from more than 30 feet away, crossing St. Peter on the diagonal. When she reached the back gate, I greeted her from under the carport and explained that Carol was out front wrapping up. "Hey, do me a favor, Michael, would you? Go tell Carol to cancel whatever plan she has and to come over to my place for dinner. I just bought 2 big redfish fillets, and I've got cold beers waiting back in the fridge." Phyllis held up her heavy plastic grocery bag as proof of the redfish purchase and nodded her head leftward as proof of her nearby kitchen. "Would you do that, cutie? Hey, why don't you come?" she added last with a wide, zany smile, amused by her sudden new idea. Not knowing what to do at first, whether I should give her an answer on the spot or walk and get Carol, I delayed a few seconds and turned to make sure my effects were all properly shelved. "Hold on, I'll go tell Carol you're here." I walked around the back steps and up the alley. Halfway to the front, Phyllis called out again. "Dinner's at 8. Tell her to go take a shower." Out on Orleans, Carol was talking to Tony, whose minimal message I remembered I hadn't delivered. They were standing in front of her pickup, just behind the Bronco, and appeared to be speaking meaningfully. Whatever it was, whether it was a rent discussion or a conversation about Tony's water bill, interrupting seemed like a poor choice of action. Carol turned. "Was that Phyllis I heard yelling back there?" "Yes, ma'am. Phyllis asked me to tell you she's cooking dinner tonight. Redfish. She wants you to be at her place by 8. She's back there waiting for you." "No, she's not. She's probably home already." Carol leaned back a few inches to try and see down the alley, but she couldn't. "Thanks, Mike. Tell her okay, would you? If she's still there." I turned away from Carol and Tony and started back down the alley. As Carol predicted, Phyllis was not still at the gate. I absolved myself and went inside the apartment to get a rag. I needed thinner to get the paint off my arms and a rag to do the rubbing. I grabbed the thinner off the shelf again, sat on the back steps, and went to work, not enjoying the pungent thinner fumes up so close. It occurred to me then that I had never once painted the outside of a house with oil-based paint. Trim, yes, but exterior shingles and clapboards were usually latex jobs. I would ask Carol about this. I would also tell her about the invitation Phyllis gave me, and inquire as to whether she thought I should go. The idea of having red fish and cold beer with a couple of neighbors, not to mention Carol, sounded fun. Deciding to accept the invite once my arms were clean, assuming Carol approved, I retrieved one of my own beers and then went back out to see where she was. Nearly there, I heard tires screech and the octave-dropping whine of a vehicle with manual transmission accelerating. Out front, Carol was reaching into the passenger side of her truck, and Tony's Bronco had just pulled away. At the curb, I looked down Orleans and saw the distinctive teal and chrome Bronco slow down to the red light of Carrollton with its right blinker on. "Quite a day's work we did," said Carol, backing away from her truck. She smiled and took a deep breath and shut the truck door with an authoritative whoop. Mildly curious about my fellow tenant's speedy departure, but then soon unconcerned again, I replied amicably, "After all, my place is Periwinkle now. What's not to like?" "That's right," Carol beamed enthusiastically, seeming pleased that I was back. She was in a good mood. The long workday was over, and we were both visibly glad for it. "I see you got the paint off," she added, "and I know what you're going to say." "What?" "Why oil-based, right?" "Oh yeah, why did we use it?" I asked her, as if reminded about something I'd long before forgotten. The truth is, I overestimated my last interior and never bothered to return the extra. "Isn't it expensive?" I remember one of the real reasons people didn't paint the exteriors of their houses with oil-based enamels. "It's all expensive," Carol said smartly. "Anyway, the house is pretty small and I knew I had enough. I also didn't want to lug all the periwinkle back to the paint store. I figured it was less lugging all around if I just brought it here. Besides, the house will last forever now." Carol looked around quietly for a moment. It was dusk. Seizing an opportunity, I told her that Phyllis had invited me to dinner also. Then I asked her casually whether she thought I should go. If Carol wanted me to go, I would. If the question appeared to surprise her, then I wouldn't. After asking, I smiled like I didn't really care either way, like we both knew Phyllis was suspicious, and why would I want to eat with a couple of 44-year-old women anyway? At first, Carol's expression dropped. Her brow knitted seriously for a second, but then she smiled again, this time in a colder, more matronly way. The smile of our first few meetings, landlady to new tenant. Sure, of course you should go. Are you sure? I asked her next, attempting to play it out smooth. I think Phyllis only asked me because I was her messmate, and she felt bad. Nonsense. What did she say, 8? 8. Well then, you've got 45 minutes to shower, change, and get over there. Now I have to go do the same. Carol walked into the street toward her driving door. I guess I'll see you over there, I said a little louder. And go early if you want, Carol added last. Phyllis always has beers in the fridge. Yeah, she said she did. Getting in her truck, Carol smiled happily, which I was glad to see, but distinctly to herself, looking forward as though reminded of something fun. I turned around and walked back down the alley. The sun was down under the western part of the neighborhood, but a warm, clear spring heat lingered in the yard.